Chapter 14 of Hearts, Part 2. Anatani pressed through the market crowd at the fastest trot that wouldn't gather attention, and it didn't take her long to find Whitehorn once more. He was standing in the open space between two neighboring stalls, looking through the basket held by one of his escorts and comparing it with a note held in one hoof. A second later, Anna located her little hireling, who was watching from behind one of the stalls, sizing up the scene. The kid darted out in a burst of motion, bumping into Whitehorn with far more force than he had when pickpocketing Anna. Whitehorn flinched back, eyes wide, only to watch the kid scamper between the legs of his escorts, raise a bag of freshly stolen bits up in a triumphant hoof, and blow a loud, mocking raspberry. Whitehorn blinked, his expression caught somewhere between confusion and offense. His first escort exchanged a glance with the second, who wasted no time in dropping the grocery basket and stepping forwards. And like that, the kid was off. He slipped through the busy crowd in the way that only a fool could, with both flustered bluecoats charging after him with shouts of "Stop!" and "Thief!" Whitehorn was still staring after them in shock when Anna came up to his side.
Hey!
He jumped, one hoof flying up to straighten his vest, almost as if by reflex, as he turned to face her. Ah, Anatani. There was a moment of silence, and his confusion turned to suspicion. Did you put that fool up to robbing me? Anna shrugged.
I told him to distract your escorts. That being said...
She smirked, glancing sidelong towards the fading sounds of the commotion.
I'm developing an appreciation for his work.
Whitehorn sighed. Well, I suppose we'd best use what little time we have wisely. I've been trying to make an opportunity for you, but I'm afraid the Frieselanders have been very diligent since you bombed the city.
Oh, yeah. That was Kava's idea, by the way.
Anna grinned as she turned back to Whitehorn, but the frown on his face gave her pause.
Did you not like it?
Whitehorn gave a curt shake of his head. I very much did not. The city is more united against the Baronlanders than ever, and surrender is the last idea on any pony's list. What exactly were you thinking?
Hey, you told me to apply pressure,
Anna said. She couldn't quite keep the disdain out of her voice.
Just because you spend every night lying awake putting together plots and plans doesn't mean I can tell what you want just by looking you in the eye.
Whitehorn's brow furrowed, and his lip curled back, and for an imagined moment, Anna thought that she was seeing a flash of real fury on his face. But it was gone as quick as it came. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, and when he spoke, it was with the same courteous manner he always used. Yes, you're right. I wasn't specific in my request. In fact, I had been hoping a hooves-off approach would lend to better results. It's wrong of me to chastise you for that. Anna blinked. She had been expecting a bit more of an argument.
Okay.
He nodded, face relaxing into a polite smile that seemed so natural, it was difficult to imagine anything else ever occupying the space. That being said, the fact remains that we're in a poor position, and steps must be taken to rectify it. I have 2 tasks for you, specific ones, to be accomplished as soon as convenient. Anna arched a brow.
Well, let's hear it.
First, the Commoners Guild has its hole near the North Gate, in an unmarked, repurposed tavern. I have some suspicions about the guildmaster there, and I'd like you to see if you can find any evidence of activity unbecoming of his position, and especially anything that might turn his guild against him. Understood? Anna answered with a dismissive nod, turning to watch the ponies milling past.
Yeah, you want dirt. What's the second?
Second, and this is the main one, I will need to forge a document written from Duchess Nettlekiss's desk. I will need a copy of her seal, as well as several instances of her writing or the writing of her scribes. Now it was Anna's turn to frown.
Nuttlecus isn't even in the city right now.
Correct. Whitehorn's smile widened, almost like a teacher expressing pride for a student. She is commanding the defense of Castle Urtica, under siege by Barrenland troops under command of Duke Titus. Will that be a problem?
A problem?
She had never had to infiltrate a siege before. She and Gava had always tried to keep their distance whenever war broke out, following their dad's warnings concerning such conflicts. Getting into the castle would mean sneaking past not only 1 or 2, but 4 siege lines. She'd have to pass 2 just to get out of Frieseland, and then another 2 to get into Castle Urtica. And then she'd have to do it again, she realized, to get back. A shadow passed over her, and she glanced up towards the round-bellied patrol ship floating high overhead. The cannons on it were small, with little vertical traversal, as befit a boat unlikely to leave the airspace of the city, or face more than rowdy merchants. It was nothing like the larger ships that pulled out of port every evening, laden down with belly guns meant for bombardment, and a fresh load of supplies for the siege. She narrowed her eyes as the plan took shape in her head. Sneaking onto a troop transport, though not the easiest task, would be far simpler than running 4 siege lines.
I can handle it.
Exquisite. Whitehorn gave a quick nod. And one more thing. I'd rather avoid having my wallet stolen again for the sake of conversation, and I've arranged a drop where you can deliver anything you find. He reached into his vest pocket, pulling out a small slip of paper. There's a printer at this address. She won't ask any questions, even if you send Gava. Just tell her you have a delivery for the table, and she'll make sure it finds its way to me. Anna took the paper, glancing down at the address with a bemused quirk of her lips.
Anyone ever tell you you read too many thrillers?
If Whitehorn heard the jab, he didn't show any sign of it. I may also leave messages for you with her. Now then, unless you had any questions for me, I believe our business here is concluded. His ears twitched, and he looked off to one side. And with no time to spare, it would seem. Anna followed his gaze. Barely visible above the throng of shoppers, the sharpened helmet horns of Whitehorn's escorts were bobbing steadily closer.
Yep, guess I'll take my leave then.
With one last wink, Anatani lowered her head, slipped back into the crowd, and made her way towards the edge of the market. She had a busy day ahead of her.
This is such a waste of time.
Rainbow paced across the ceiling of the Argo's rec room, muzzle twisted in irritation. It had taken nearly an hour for the inquisitive inspection team to search the ship to their satisfaction, poking their heads into every room, poring over crew and cargo manifests with Sea Saber, and towards the end even walking around with crowbars and peeling up seemingly random wall panels or grates in search of paraphernalia. They had left with little ceremony, leaving only their mess and a promise that they would send a tugboat out at their earliest convenience. That had been yesterday. The sun had set and risen, and no tug had come. Sea Saber had hailed the fleet control on the radio, and had been told that although yes, they had been approved for docking, Prince Silverblood wanted to be there to greet them. Prince Silverblood also, apparently, was very busy sleeping, and then he was very busy fulfilling those parts of his morning schedule that absolutely could not be moved to another time, and then he was seeing to an unexpected issue that absolutely demanded his immediate attention. And so they had waited, floating along in the wake of the merchant lord's ship as it chugged steadily eastwards. It hadn't been so bad at first. The orichalcum dwarfed the Argo in size, and whenever Rainbow looked in its direction, she was struck with the humbling sensation of being a seagull that dove underwater, only to find a great whale looking up at it. Even without her depth perception, she could tell it was at least 5 times the height of the Argo and maybe over 10 times its length. A single massive propeller twisted lazily through the air at its rear, the blades throwing off great winds that could blow smaller ships out of the sky if they weren't careful, and a trio of leaning smokestacks lined at the top of the ship, like the spines of a dragon, each one trailing acrid black smoke so thick that it stretched all the way across the horizon before completely dissipating. Stubby wings poked out of the bottom, appearing almost uselessly small, until one of the fleet's other ships hovered close, and one realized that each one could be 100 feet long in its own right. There was no visible balloon. Star Trails had mentioned that the gas envelope was probably held within the thickly armored hull. The ship was sleek for its size, floating through the sky like a long-tailed bird with its wings tucked tight to its chest. The hull was painted a dazzling white, and the tall lines of glass near the top that Rainbow assumed to be its control center was flanked by embossed silver carved into the shape of sharp feathered wings running the entire length of the ship. On the front of the ship, shadowed by its own bulk, were statues of Princess Celestia and Princess Luna, standing proudly upon pedestals carved into the shapes of writhing wendigos. This had been enough to leave Rainbow awestruck for maybe 15 minutes. Hours later, now it just annoyed her.
We should have just kept going,
Rainbow groused.
We need to be heading north, not east. Luckily, that thing's built for just about everything but speed.
Star Trail screwed up her muzzle and thought as she leaned over the pool table off to one side of the rec room.
We can retrace our flight path in a third of the time once we're all fixed up. And the fixing will take time too.
Rainbow's tail whipped behind her as she completed another lap of the ceiling.
Probably days.
Not many days. Flint was standing on the opposite side of the table, his cue leaning against one shoulder. He didn't bother to cover his yawn. Envelope's a quick fix, and traders move fast when you're buying.
I don't care. It's stupid. It's politics,
Trails corrected. She smirked as she stepped back and lined up her pool cue.
Which means, yes, it's stupid, but rich ponies can often afford to be stupid in expensive ways.
Her hoof twitched, the tip striking a ball with a sharp crack. The ball raced across the table, bounced off the opposite end, and came to a stop without hitting any of its neighbors. Flint laughed.
But what's the point?
Rainbow landed so she could get a better look at the long window that ran the length of the rec room. The orichalcum was big enough to block the rising sun altogether, casting the room into shadow.
Doesn't he understand that we have somewhere we need to be?
That's exactly the point, Rainbow, Flint said. She could hear the sound of him lining up his cue to shoot as he spoke. Rich bastard wants us to know that we ain't important. Or he gets off on the idea of us stewing in here, missing sleep so we can be ready for his fancy breakfast. Rainbow's ear twitched at the crack of his cue striking a ball. There was a bounce, another crack, and the clatter of two balls falling into the pockets.
What the hey, Flint?
Trails let out an exasperated sigh.
How is it I was raised on an airship and somehow you're better at playing pool on one?
'Cause you were raised on a big fancy airship, Traily, and you're shit at pool. Rainbow let out a frustrated growl as she spun on her hooves.
I'm gonna go take a nap.
Trails gave a little wave as the Pegasus passed by.
See you in 10 minutes.
And bring some coffee when you get back. Rainbow ignored the quips, stomping through the steam vented from the opening door without a word. What right did this Prince Silverblood have to leave them hanging like this? What if they'd been in serious need of immediate repairs? No, they were in serious need of repairs. Twilight might be all alone in the frozen north that very moment in need of their help and wondering where they were. What if they took so long to arrive that she thought something had gone wrong and left without them? What if she was looking for them right now? Or what if that monster Midnight was about to take over unless someone intervened? Rainbow shook her head, dislodging the useless thoughts. Worrying wasn't going to speed things up. Nothing she could do was going to speed things up. The door to the cargo hold opened with a puff of steam, and Rainbow entered just in time to catch Applejack stepping out of her room with an unstifled yawn. The groggy smile on her face turned to a frown as she took in Rainbow's expression.
Land sakes, gal. Y'all lose a race while I was sleeping? Not in the mood, AJ.
Rainbow prowled towards her cloud home, wings twitching as she splayed them out.
Hey, hold on now.
Applejack trotted up to Rainbow's side, nudging one wing closed with a gentle huff.
Don't you fly off and sulk all alone. Why don't we talk about it? So you don't want to go talk to Flint instead? Rainbow snapped. I'm sure he makes for a compelling conversation behind closed doors. Rainbow...
Applejack sighed, taking her hat off to brush her hoof through her mane.
Why are you so upset about that? Amir's business is her own.
Rainbow rounded on her with an angry snarl.
I'm upset because...
She groaned, stomping a hoof against the ground as she tried to put her racing thoughts in order.
Why am I just now hearing about this, AJ? We're supposed to be best friends, but you don't care enough to even mention that you're going out with Flint?
Her lip curled up in disgust, and she gestured with a huff.
And Flint! He's a total pothead.
First off, Applejack held a hoof up.
We ain't dating. Second, it's not like I've been planning this or anything. It just happened. It just happened,
Rainbow echoed.
AJ, what would Granny Smith say?
Applejack blinked. A sad smile crawled onto her face as she cocked her head.
You never really got to know Granny that well, huh?
Rainbow frowned.
What? Well, not going too detailed, but you didn't think the Apple family got so big through careful planning, did you?
Rainbow blanched. She looked away, taking a sudden interest in one of the pipes running along the wall. Applejack let out a low chuckle. She placed a hoof on Rainbow's shoulder, guiding her towards her room.
All right, fine. Promised y'all I'd explain myself, and I guess I'm a bit late on that. Let's sit down, okay? Right.
Rainbow kept her gaze carefully averted as she followed Applejack into her room. It was as sparse as ever, with the same plain mattress and desk they'd all been given, though it was kept so clean that it was hard to believe that anyone actually lived in it. Applejack set her hat on the desk before settling onto the bed with a sigh. Rainbow, not quite sure how she felt about sharing a bed with the other mare just then, remained standing. Applejack spent a few seconds looking down at her hooves, her mouth working side to side, as if considering what to say. Finally, with a little nod to herself, she looked up and caught Rainbow's eye.
It's been hard, Rainbow.
Rainbow didn't need to ask what exactly it was to understand. They'd been through the same trials ever since Canterlot, and the terse statement carried far more meaning than the words alone. In that little room in the back of a salvager's cargo hold, Rainbow suddenly found herself really looking at Applejack for the first time in weeks. There were shallow bags under her eyes, and thin, hairless scars across her neck and barrel, carrying the legacy of wounds inflicted by talon and bullet alike. Somehow, these little details were easy to miss when one wasn't looking, when there was a homely country smile to distract, and the shadow of a worn-in hat to conceal. But now, with the smile gone and the patched hat separated from its owner, Rainbow could see the weight of the world pressing down on her friend's shoulders.
Y'all know I love you girls,
Applejack continued.
Hey, y'all are all the family I got left in this mess. But y'all tend a bit towards the,
She paused, offering up an apologetic smile.
Eccentric.
Normally, Rainbow would have taken the comment as a challenge, but she knew it was meant in the kindest way.
How do you mean?
I mean, you never settled down, Applejack said. One way or another, y'all males are all in. I'm just a small-town farm pony, nothing special here, but y'all gals are something else. When one of y'all gets an idea in your head, there ain't nothing that can stop you, and I'm usually the one that's gotta be there to rein you in. I'm the...
She pursed her lips, brow furrowing as she thought.
Look, when the other ponies in town had an issue with our little group, I'm the one they always came to. You get what I'm saying?
Rainbow frowned.
I think so.
Applejack let out a breath of relief.
Oh, that's good. 'Cause I'd hate to offend you with my clumsy wording.
But what does this have to do with Flint?
Rainbow cocked her head.
Well, all y'all have some way you get through things. You know what I mean?
Applejack gestured vaguely with a huff as she spoke.
Twilight can lock herself up with some books, and Rarity can put together some kind of dress or something. Shy's fine as long as she's got some space and something to take care of, and y'all just buckle down and sweat your stress out. And Pinky...
Applejack shook her head, eyes wide.
That gal just don't stop. Now, back in the day, when I was still a farm pony and life still made a lick of sense, all I had to do was set myself straight, was head home. Put some honest work into the land, leave something for the apples to come after me, you know? Make some pies with Granny, or run a delivery with Big Mac, or tell a story to Apple Bloom, or even just buck trees till my legs ache. And,
She looked away as she spoke, her eyes growing distant, and her voice growing wistful.
We've all lost ponies, but y'all got ways to deal without them. I don't.
But you have me.
Rainbow stepped forwards, resting a hoof on Applejack's forelegs.
The other girls might not be here now, but we can still talk.
Applejack hung her head with a tired sigh.
I know, Rainbow. And I appreciate that, really. Maybe it's part my fault that I'm feeling this way. But when I see y'all spending so many hours practicing with them blades, looking so angry, or when I see Twilight struggling just to keep her own body under control, well...
She looked up, meeting Rainbow's eye.
Something tells me that if I don't keep us anchored, we'll all be lost at sea.
Rainbow grimaced as she looked into her old friend's green eyes. She'd always seemed so confident, even when things were at their worst, and Rainbow would be lying if she said that steadfastness hadn't helped her cope with her experiences. Still.
That's not fair.
Applejack's lips quirked up into a little smile.
It's fair enough, I reckon, considering the circumstances. I may not be able to handle politics or duel a griffin, but I can do this. I don't mind doing this so much.
Rainbow wasn't sure what to say to that, so she leaned forwards and pulled Applejack into a firm hug. Applejack hugged back, her hooves steady and strong, like always. At length, Rainbow stepped back.
So, I guess Flint is to help you.
Flint's my Applejack,
Applejack said with a wry grin. She held a hoof up to Rainbow's muzzle, stemming her response.
Now, let me explain before you go rattling off again, all right?
Rainbow's brow furrowed, but she didn't fight the interruption. Instead, she leaned back and gave a quick nod.
Thanks. Now then,
Applejack tapped a hoof to her chin as she let out a thoughtful hum.
It ain't like I've been pining after him ever since we met or nothing like that. In fact, I found him straight unlikable at first, treating us like foals and with no respect for just about anything.
Exactly,
Rainbow blurted.
That's what I'm saying.
Hush.
Applejack gave Rainbow a disapproving glare before continuing.
Thing is, I felt like I could relax around him. whenever it all got too much, when I got tired of worrying after y'all gals, I could sit down with Flint and a couple mugs of cider and just talk. Not about weirds or bounty hunters or anything crazy like that, but just laugh. They'd tell me about his family and I'd tell them about mine, and we kinda... She shrugged. It almost felt like sitting on the porch at sundown.
Rainbow snorted.
Hard to imagine him having a family.
Well, he's got one,
Applejack said.
They live in a barren land village on an island east of Highton, and they grow apples. Apples!
She let out a breathy chuckle.
Can you believe it? I ain't even seen an apple in this Celestia Forsaken world, Rainbow, but I can sit down with Flint and trade stories about apple bucking. They make their own cider, and he checks every time the ship makes landfall if there's family cider being sold anywhere. Sends most of his paycheck back home, too.
Huh.
Rainbow looked back towards the rec room, recalling Flint making fun of Trails for being bad at pool.
I guess I kinda assumed he just, popped out of the ground one day with a gun and a bad attitude.
Applejack let out a hearty chortle at that.
Yeah, I reckon that's how most ponies see him.
But you guys being friends isn't what's confusing me.
Rainbow turned back to Applejack with an arched brow.
I've seen you two hanging out all the time. What I wasn't expecting was to find you in his room with the smell of cider on your breath.
She blinked, cocking her head.
Where'd you even find cider? I thought Flint's whole stash was a gun.
Well, he's got a reserve under his bed, of course.
Oh, totally.
Rainbow rolled her eyes.
Of course.
Applejack grinned, but the expression didn't last long in the face of Rainbow's stern gaze.
I admit, it took me by surprise, too. Would have called you a madman if you told me last week we'd go for a roll in the hay. But that dive to Canterlot?
She pursed her lips, taking a deep breath.
Artie, when I saw that green dragonfire coming my way, I thought I was dead as a chicken crossing a fox. Probably would be, too. Froze up real good, out in the open. If not for Flint. Let me tell you, Rainbow, when that stallion tackles you, armor and all, it's like a train. Brought me down into that fountain bank and took the brunt of the blast on himself. I thought it'd cost him his life, too. Y'all know how damn hot that fire was. But when I finally managed to push him over and threw his helmet off, there he was. And you know what he said?
Rainbow leaned in, ears forward. Applejack had fallen into the same swingy tone she used when she was telling Apple family stories late at night, and she had to admit that she was getting invested.
What did he say?
Fucking lizard.
Applejack pushed the words out in a rough impersonation of Flint's deep, gravelly voice. A moment later, she rolled onto her side and collapsed into a deep guffaw, straining to speak through it.
Hey, Rainbow, y'all should have seen his face, smoking and everything.
The laughter was contagious.
And that...
Despite herself, Rainbow couldn't resist cracking up as she spoke.
That worked? That's what did it.
Applejack's laughter finally died down with a wistful sigh.
Not exactly. But I guess that was the moment where I realized that, well, any day I have could be my last. You know? And with all that business going on with Twy, and then that changeling sneaking aboard and killing one of us in the middle of the night, in a place where I thought we were safe.
She shook her head, one eye still hidden by the bed beneath her.
We were all a bit shaken after that. When we got together to toast to Dusty, I found myself wanting something only he could provide. And he did.
Yeah, I get it.
Rainbow nodded, looking down at her hooves in thought. It still felt a little weird to her, but she understood now. But there was one thing still nagging at her.
So, are you two, like, a thing now?
Hey, I ain't got a clue.
Applejack picked herself back up with a shrug.
I ain't sure if I could see Flint as a father, but I could see him as a farmer. Not like I'm looking for anything serious in the middle of all this mess, but it's hard to keep a friendship with a pony you've been intimate with.
She leaned down, catching Rainbow's eye.
I hope I ain't upset you.
No, it's all right.
Rainbow offered up an apologetic smile.
I'm sorry for how I reacted. I'm glad that you guys have something.
Applejack grinned. She swung her hooves around, popping out of the bed.
I know he's rough around the edges, Artie, and he's got an awful lot of edges. But there's more to him than just that. That's something I do know.
The Argo lurched under hoof, and Rainbow's ears perked up at the sound of the engine spinning up as she swayed to keep her balance.
Oh, finally!
She took to the air, throwing her hooves up with a whoop of celebration.
Ha! We're moving!
Only took, 12 hours, at least?
Applejack stepped over and placed her hat back on her head with a quick wink.
Guess we better get up front then, huh?
The two mares made their way to the flight deck at an energetic canter to confirm that, yes, they had finally been given permission to dock. A little tugboat had floated out from the bay nestled along the underside of the Orichalcum, and Rainbow could barely sit still as she watched the ponies on its deck scramble to fasten the Argo's docking chains to sturdy metal rods. The Orichalcum grew steadily larger until it cast the entire Argo in its shadow. They were tugged beneath it, and when Rainbow flew forth and pressed her muzzle against the thick glass of the flight deck, she was able to see the line of hangars built into the great ship's belly, and her mouth hung open in awe as she watched the tarnished doors of the rearmost hangar slowly swing open with twin bursts of steam. Two more tugboats, not in use just then, hung from hooks towards the stern, swaying lazily with the wind of motion. They were pulled under the open hangar, a door boxing them in on each side. More steam vented from the hangar, clouding Rainbow's view outside, and she jumped in alarm at the unexpected scraping clanks that echoed throughout the hull. There was a pause, an upwards lurch, and then the Argo was pulled up into the bowels of the larger ship with a steady ratcheting click. By the time the steam cleared enough to see again, they were inside. Catwalks and scaffolding lined what Rainbow could see of the hangar. A pair of ponies in worn-out jumpsuits were guarding them from above with the narrowed eyes of seasoned workers sizing up the day's job. You done gopping? Flint chuckled as Rainbow jumped again, rounding on him with a flick of her tail. Impressive engineering, huh? But you know those mechanics can see you staring at them like a filly at the circus.
And you shouldn't be flying, Saber added. Remember, you don't want to stand out.
Fine.
Rainbow let out an irritated grumble as she landed next to a grinning Applejack. The crew made their way back to the cargo hold as one, Rainbow using her wings to adjust her uniform as they walked. Shaking it down and hanging it up for a few hours had done little to straighten out the wrinkles, leaving her looking like she'd just rolled out of bed.
How does everyone else look so crisp?
She narrowed her eyes in thought.
Is there even an iron on this ship?
With the 6 ponies all assembled in the cargo hold, Saber reached up and pulled the heavy lever on the rear wall with both hooves. There were 2 heavy clangs, the hiss of the steam venting from either side of the bay door, and then the steady clicking of the gears as the thick bay door lowered itself to the floor outside. It came to a rest with a heavy thud, and now only the lingering steam swirling around the ramp blocked Rainbow's view of the hangar. She could see the obscured shadow of a single pony waiting at the bottom of the ramp.
Wait.
Rainbow narrowed her eye, pulse quickening as she picked out more details. The shadow had long, swept-back wings, and the tips of its feathers poking up to either side like daggers, and it stood with a lithe, cat-like stance that seemed out of place compared to the bulk of its body. And when it turned its head to the side, she saw the hard, cruel curve of a beak.
Kava!
Adrenaline flooded Rainbow's body as time seemed to slow. Her wings flared open painfully wide, almost throwing her off balance without the weight of her blades attached to them as she dropped down into a ready stance. She winced as the lingering wounds from her fight with the changeling cried out in complaint, but she didn't spare them any thought as her mind raced from one question to the next. What was the bounty hunter doing here? Was the orichalcum a trap? None of her friends had their weapons with them. Could she get to her room, strap on her wing blades, and return before anyone was hurt? Would they be able to escape the hangar? Her eye darted around the room, straining to pierce the veil of steam enough to spot any potential controls. She might be able to dash out fast enough to release the Argo, then stall and buy some time for the others to get back inside to safety. All those thoughts flashed through her mind in a scant second, but when the steam finally cleared from the ramp, it wasn't a sneering bounty hunter waiting for her at the bottom. This griffin was thicker around the chest and legs, a male, and instead of the dark blue of Gavis feathers, his plumage was a ruddy gray. Strangest of all was the expression on his face. His beak was curved up in a casual smile, his head cocked to one side, as if he was listening to an old joke. My employer extends condolences for the long wait. His voice was deep but relaxed. His half-lidded eyes looked between the stunned ponies before him with an intent disinterest. If you'll follow me, you can discuss your business in his suite.